The Tom Kelly Show. Everybody, I want you to go to the Tom Kelly Show.
Hang tight, Tessa. Hang tight.
To know about the Tom Kelly Show.
Here we go. There we go. Buttons fixed. Multi-track mode set. Trigger warning. Spoiler alert. Hide your office supplies. Who wants to podcast today? You're listening to episode 160 of the Tom Kelly Show. Our guest today is Professor Tessa West. Your doctor? Do you go by doctor or professor? Which one's better?
I just go by Tessa, actually.
You're
all the titles.
Yeah, I'm one of those hip young professors. Okay, there you go. You can just call me Tessa. Anyway, Tessa, and now that you don't have her last name, you're going to need the title of her book. Tessa West, she wrote Jerks at Work, Toxic Coworkers, and What to Do About Them. And I have actually perused the book, and I found her while at the gym when she was on Good Morning America 3. And I honestly, I fell in love with the book from the graphics they were showing about the different types of bosses you can have. She was on mute. Frankly, my best relationship, actually, I booked a guest without really hearing her voice. But I want to get this disclaimer out quick. I'm going to talk about toxicity at work in my own life today. A lot of you guys know me from my work at The View, Tamron Hall, America's Got Talent, and a million other shows. Don't go guessing which show I'm working at, okay? I've also had a lot of jobs you've never heard of, people, but I want to be honest about my experience, and I'm just hoping that nobody I'm talking about will listen to today's show. This is a self-growth podcast. I want to address problems I have had in my life and career and my many jobs, because the one thing that refreshed me when I lost 4 out of my 5 jobs at work, and I'm talking comedian, 3 TV shows, and then doing a lot of freelance personal appearances. The one thing that actually refreshed me was not having to deal with coworkers. Other comedians, even the best of them, can be toxic. You know, the bookers are toxic. I actually just met with a booker at a comedy club last night, and he was polite, and he said he remembered me, blah, blah, blah. And it was a club I worked at a few times back in the day when somebody else was managing it. And God bless, he says, well, Tom, I don't remember you ever being passed at the club. I chose to not be insulted. I said, well, then you know what? I want to be passed by you. I'll go through the process. I'll go through the hoops. And he was so polite, so charming. And as I walked away, I was kind of behind a wall and he couldn't see me. I heard him say, well, that was a waste of 10 minutes. That's what he said. And he didn't know I was listening. And you know what? That's his opinion. And again, the poor guy gets lots of people like me asking him for stuff every day. Fine. But listen, and you're getting into it's how do you deal with the toxicity? I've worked at TV shows where the secret to long-term survival was not fixing the problem, waiting for the problem to get so bad that other people would fix it. I've worked at a couple of places where I got hired by one boss and the other boss hated me just because I wasn't the person they hired. And I think with my radio job, where I telecommute, and I've telecommuted for 19 years. I've blatantly have joked with my bosses. I think the reason why I get along with them is I don't see them more than once or twice a year in person. I don't have to laugh at their jokes. I don't have to listen to their stories. I'm not even sure if I can name their kids anymore, and I owe them my health insurance. And even with that job, during the pandemic, I had one boss who got a little weird with me, and we'll leave it at that. The world is reopening, and I have now a woman who I think is going to fix our problems, Dr. Tessa West, but you can call her Tessa.
Yeah, that was a great introduction and a reminder to all of us that moving jobs does not solve our jerk at work problems.
Well, I mean,
hopping from one job to another, you're just going to encounter a new, probably worse jerk, right?
Well, and even I think the one thing I can bring to you when you write the sequel to this book is even at the jobs that you would think are fun, I would say the toxicity is worse. Like I would say out of all my jobs, I would say the toxicity in stand-up comedy is worse because there is no overall sweeping human resources department to set a standard for the comedy industry. You know,
everyone just gets to do whatever they want, and you probably just do whatever it takes to succeed, right? Because it's a bit of a zero-sum game, like getting those really good gigs. What do you have to do to stand out from everybody else? There's probably some forms of competition that go on behind the scenes, a little bit cutthroat, a little bit nasty.
yeah, and then even going beyond things for a second, listen, you working at NYU, you probably wind up in trouble if you don't get a kid's preferred pronouns right. For me, I'll go into rooms where people will just call you an effing a-hole and use much, much worse words for whatever your ethnicity or gender preference is. And you're like, all right, see you tomorrow. You know, there's none of, you know, for as much as, actually, that's one thing I do say about kids today, for as much as they're whining, and I actually side with them. I identify with a lot of things. But with that being said, for as much as we complain in the academic environment, I'm like, dude, I work in bars. There's nobody to call. Nobody's going to help you if you get called this awful word, that awful word, that awful word. And we're talking about more gentle words, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the really explicit stuff is bad, although I got to say, you're not going to like this. But as a psychologist who studies asshole behavior, people prefer being treated like terrible to their face than the kind of more subtle stuff that's really hard to call out.
Yes.
Because as long as there's a human resource or somebody who cares, but if there's nobody who cares, then yes, it's just a complete nightmare.
No, very clearly, like we joked about, me and a friend joked about a boss we used to have back at ABC. She's retired. She was tough as nails. I only made her laugh on her retirement day. If that, and I don't even know if she laughed. It was a polite smile. And then she laughed at one thing I said after she retired. But the joke about her was, at least she would stab you to your front. There was no doubt. There was no doubt that if she was not happy with you, there was no fake warmth and a hello in the elevator. There was nothing. You knew, you saw the knife, and it was never going to come behind you. It was going to go right into your eyeballs. So let's get into this. You're a professor. You've written a book about dealing with toxicity in the workplace. What are your tips for that? I know there's types of toxic people.
Yeah, I think kind of there's a couple main themes of the book. One thing I focus a lot on is, how do you actually bring up this stuff with these people? A lot of us have lay theories that you should confront a jerk at work, that you should spell out their bad behavior, and you should tell them how they make you feel. And I think 9 times out of 10, those strategies completely fall flat.
Because then they
often backfire.
Yeah, then they know you're weak.
They know you're weak, but they also, the one thing we don't like to admit about these people is they have a skill we don't. They're usually better at something than us, and they've learned to really leverage that to succeed at work. And often that skill is not getting caught. So the best jerks at work know how to be nice behind your back. They know how to even promote you to other people, or to give you credit for ideas, some things you didn't even do, in order for people like the boss or the boss's boss to want to promote them and think they're, great to work with. They're a team player. They do all their sneaky business behind the scenes. So confronting them isn't going to do anything. It's just going to make them up their game.
So
most of the time.
So I'll give you the titles, and then I want to reply to that thought here. There's kick up, kick downers, or kiss up, kick downers, where they kiss the boss's butt and kick down, if not across. Credit stealers. We'll talk about them in a minute. Bulldozers, free riders, micromanagers, neglectful bosses seem to be all the big heads there. Now, what you were just saying right there is, I feel like there's 2 types of toxic coworkers. There are toxic coworkers who are playing what I now call Game of Thrones, where they're doing a power game and they're trying to work their way up the ladder. And then the other type of toxic coworker is just a mean person who has a little piece of real estate in their miserable lives, and they love exerting their little bit of pressure on you.
I think the first part's right. There's definitely the Game of Thrones people, and the kiss up, kick downers is a perfect example of that. You do have some people who are just inherently kind of rotten to the core, but I actually think that kind of jerk is fairly rare. Most of the time we assume they're rotten to the core, but the causes of their behavior are things that are completely outside of our purview. Maybe they're getting pressure from above, or, it's like this culture is kind of dripping down upon them, and they're doing what it takes for them to succeed, which is just to create this kind of rotten little culture around them. I think most people at work don't actually want to be that mean, and mostly because it harms them more than it helps them. It actually doesn't help anyone to be that mean intentionally.
I don't know, but like using your line of the kiss up, kick downers, that is 1/3 to 1/2 of all TV producers in the 1990s and 2000s. I think it started changing. It did. I did think, yeah, it did. It started changing at a certain point. But that said, yeah, like it's like, hey, look at, hey, celebrity, celebrity, I mean, like what I worked at Rosie O'Donnell, people who would be like, get this copy right now, like, Rosie, how are you? Yeah. And they would go up 2 octaves. Like I don't have I don't have that pitch change in me.
Yeah, I study that as an ingratiation behavior when your voice actually just goes up a couple notches. Yeah, I mean, there's a huge selection bias, right, in that industry for people who are Machiavellian and super high on social comparison. Those people select into that career because they kind of have the trappings of what it takes to make it. But the minute that behavior no longer gets them to where they want to go, they'll switch gears because they're smart and they're really good at reading people. In fact, the person you describe is probably the skill they have that others don't, is that they're incredible social perceivers. They could walk into a room, they could walk into the writer's room, look at who's sitting where and tell you who's in charge within the first minute, just based on people's postures, based on their positioning, based on who interrupts whom, which writers get heard and which ones kind of get shut down. They could tell you that within a minute, and then they'll know exactly who they can kick down and who they have to kiss up to.
But it's not just in television, that type of behavior, right? I mean, listen, this show has a fan base that includes postal workers, military,
everywhere.
We have teachers, educators, nurses. And I think that what I find amazing as I get older is I'll complain about, Elaine, the producer, and someone will say, well, Tom, that happens with nurses.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's why I wrote this book, because I've had a job since I was 16 in a video store. I've worked in restaurants. I've worked in retail. It's all the same. It's all in the dean's office. It doesn't matter where you work. It's the same. Like, human beings can't help but be themselves.
Now, is that what
scorpion? You can't help but sting everybody.
Yeah. Oh God, that's one of my favorite parables. Why did you sting? Why did scorpion sting the frog? Because it was in my nature. I couldn't help.
Couldn't help but be itself.
Side question: did you leave the video store business for education because of the toxicity, or because no one was using video stores?
I left the video store because I went away to college. But backstory for the video store: I was actually fired from the video store, not because of anything I did, but I had a boss, the one who wasn't paying attention, was actually dealing cocaine from the back room the entire time, and my entire crew was red flag from the video store. This was Hollywood Video. This tells you how old I am. Hollywood Video kids. We used to have to pick up these actual boxes of VHS tapes and rewind them. And then, video stores were kind of the rage for another 5 years or so. I couldn't rent anywhere. I was actually blacklisted because I was part of the cocaine crew, even though I had nothing to do with the cocaine. I was over 18. Talk about a jerk at work. Although I actually really liked her.
Wait, you were blacklisted from all Hollywood Videos, or?
Yeah, all Hollywood Videos. So I went away to college in Santa Barbara, and I couldn't rent a movie. I had to go to Blockbuster, which was like 30 miles away, because I was blacklisted. It really cramped my style.
As a customer, wait, even as a customer.
As a customer.
So, like, was the code word for getting cocaine like, hey, I need a 3-day rental of Point Break? Let's get to the mission of the book here, because the book is actually great, and I'm recommending people buy it. Jerks at Work by Tessa West here. Toxic Coworkers and What to Do About Them. If there's only 5 minutes left in the show, what is the most simple tip for dealing with a toxic coworker?
The most simple tip is you have to build allies at work, and those are not your friends. So you need to move away from this idea that you need best friends at work who are going to be there to support you. You need to find people who are at arm's length, who are connected to people outside of your social network. So we over rely on our friends and our close little groups to help solve these difficult issues. But what you actually need is people who know others who've been victimized, who know your boss, who can help you kind of frame the problem to your boss in a way that they'll care. And that information is often kind of not within our purview, not in our immediate circles. So I think the hardest part about dealing with jerks, but the most effective way, is going outside your comfort zone and finding those folks. And they're often in surprising places. So where I work, the people who work in IT are actually the most well-connected, not other professors, not, grad students or deans or whatever. IT, they see what's on people's computers, and that's like, they know what's up. The IT people know who pretends to be nice to people in power, but are actually jerks to those who they don't see as having power, them. And that's really critical piece of information to know.
Is that because they're reading your emails?
They are reading your emails. They have to do things like show up and fix your printer. And I was shocked when I first started at how many people who I thought were lovely tortured the IT people, or just treated them like total crap.
Yeah.
And then those people ended up treating everyone else like crap that was beneath them. It just took me a while to actually see that kind of get manifested, but I learned it very soon. And so often there's people like that, or they work in like, the coffee shop that's, nearby that people go to, staff, people that we usually don't think of as people we work with, are often kind of really important sources of information. They see and hear a lot more than others. But because they don't have our job description, or because we don't interact with them socially, we often don't really consider them important people in the workplace, but they're sometimes the most important people.
So let's go through, I'm going to speed round with you here. I'm going to do 4 or 5 things that people sent to me. I'm going to give you annotated versions of what people sent me without names. Okay.
Got it.
Ready? The first one is the one I love. How do you deal with the coworker who is going to keep pretending she's your boss until she actually becomes your boss?
Oh, the faux boss. I hate the faux boss. So they sound a little bit like a micromanager. I think you need to have a little clarity conversation with your actual boss about what people's roles are. And I'd say it sounds like this typical issue we see at work, which is a lack of role clarity. Who's in charge of what? And I think you need to get your whole team involved. So this can't just be between you and the other person. You need to get everybody who's on your team that's working together to figure out who's in charge of what. And I like this idea of kind of divvying up responsibilities at the beginning, and then checking in on what work people have done and what work they're doing that they didn't agree to do, because it can kind of, if you're starting to get micromanaged by a faux boss, that stuff can start to leak in really early. And then you can kind of go to your boss and not complain about this faux boss business, but complain about a sort of lack of clarity around who's doing what.
Okay, this is one I may know the person they're talking about. The grumpy facilities manager, where no matter, the person's very nice to his or her friends and very angry to anybody else who wants anything. And if this person doesn't like you, they withhold resources.
So I think the issue here is they have control and you need to get some of it back. So you're going to have to find out what their sweet spot is and offer to do some favors for these people. And people hate this. Like, I don't want to do favors for jerks at work, but it works great on neglectful bosses, offloading a little bit of their work. And it can work on grumpy people too, who actually usually have a pretty small itch that needs to be scratched, that if you offer to do it, you're going to get more flies with honey. And I've dealt with a lot of grumpy people this way, offering to offload a little bit of work, doing a couple small favors, just to kind of get in their good graces and see if it works. And oftentimes they hate their job. Often they're overworked. They're being pulled in a million directions, and maybe they have some control issues. They like holding that control. Try to just find a few little small things you can do to make them happy, and it'll make a world of difference.
Big ending. I have a friend who is a comedian, and she has a crush on 2 different comedians. And my advice to her is to never, ever date anybody in your business. What is your advice for dating at work?
All right. So I'm going to give you my advice, and then I'm going to call myself a hypocrite because I'm engaged to the person whose office is next door to mine. My advice, however, is that, and I study close relationships, but let me give you my advice. The problem isn't dating people at work, especially if you're the same power and status. The problem is when you break up. And no one ever thinks they're going to break up, but almost all relationships end in a breakup. That's the part we don't think ahead about. what is your game plan going to be when you break up? You know, are you going to see this person at work? Are you going to have to still kind of collaborate with them, work with them? Are you going to feel anxious? You have to kind of plan what that world will look like. I mean, no one likes to think that way, but that's the reality. What is your world going to look like? And if it's just a non-starter to live in that world, then I wouldn't consider dating people at work. If, however, you're never going to see them again, there's not going to be overlap, you don't need their recommendations, you're in a little bit of a safer place, but in general, that's just not the case.
You know what, doctor? I'm done rambling. I'm done rambling on this. I don't know. There's
be
so much.
careful when you dip your pen in the office ink. Just be careful.
You know what, Tessa? I've had so much fun with you. Would you do this again with me one day? I don't know when or what we'll talk about, but can we do something fun?
Sure.
So I was going to post on my Instagram, Tom Kelly Show, a little graphic with your book, Jerks at Work. And maybe I'll put my face and your face in it too. And the story will, the caption will be, tell us your best jerk at work story. And whoever has the best 3 or 4 line jerk at work story will get a free copy of this book. Tessa will mail it to you.
I absolutely will. And I will monitor for the best story.
And until next time, good night, New York.